there, everybody. Welcome to Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio and this episode of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, the podcast that is dedicated to our great volunteer fire service and the belief that developing and displaying and maintaining a professional image and a professional reputation are the duty and responsibility of all firefighters. And true professionalism is never defined by a paycheck. Tom Merrill here. Thank you for again joining me. I truly appreciate it. It is a cold and snowy day here in Buffalo on this day of recording, but man, am I fired up for 2025. 2025 is certainly shaping up to be a very busy year. I'm going to be out delivering the professional message at conferences and firefighter gatherings across this great land, from Long Island to Missouri to Illinois to South Dakota, and points everywhere in between. And I am loving it because every time I go out, I meet so many great, passionate, professional firefighters. And they're all kind and welcoming. And I always just think I come home making all these new friends. It's always a very positive experience. It always leaves me looking forward to the next trip. So I've been out and about. I've been doing work for the National Volunteer Fire Council as well, focusing on recruitment and retention. Just worked on a webinar for them. And I'm doing a lot of work for my fire engineering family. I've been rolling along with that and working on a webinar, a training webinar for them, focusing on dispatching, which is pretty cool because that's my paid profession. And I know most of you know Mike Dugan. If you're any way connected to the fire service, I think that name rings a bell. He had a legendary career in the FDNY and teaches around the country, but he also co-hosts a very popular fire engineering podcast, the Mikey G and Mikey D Show. And he does that along with another legend in the fire service, and that's Mike Galeano from Seattle. Well, Mike Dugan and I, we've been partnered up and are working together on an article for fire engineering. It'll be a supplement in the April edition, I believe, and it's going to focus on fires in big box complexes, warehouses and stores, and we're going to talk about the challenges they present. And listeners to this podcast may remember that Mike Dugan and I had a podcast on that very subject back, I think it might have been in August. So keep your eyes open for that. We've been working hard on it. And I think it's going to be in April that one comes out. So that's another thing I've been working on. And of course, FDIC is right around the corner. So remember to begin making plans to attend FDIC, April 7th to the 12th. And if you need information, you can go to FDIC.com. It'll give you all the information you need. And I really hope to see you there. I love meeting the brothers and sisters. I'm always out at all the events at night and wandering around, going to classes myself during the day. And I'll be doing my signature Professional Volunteer Fire Department presentation on that Monday. It's a 4-hour pre-conference workshop, and be honored if you're going FDIC, if you selected that to attend and come in and talk to me about this professional message that we're trying to send and work on back home, both personally as well as organizationally. So come on in. Love to talk to you. And I also have a brand new presentation still in development. I'll be rolling it out in a couple of months at the Pinsky Law Conference in the Turning Stone Casino, which is in New York. It's in Verona, New York, just between Syracuse and Utica. It's the weekend of March 27th to the 29th, and I'm really excited about this new program. I've spent over 2 years working on it, and it's titled Building a Culture of Excellence, Teamwork, and Camaraderie in our volunteer fire and EMS agencies. And I'm pretty passionate about this one. I've taken a ton of notes as I've traveled and talked to firefighters and exchanged emails with firefighters about things that are working, things that aren't working, what gets people fired up, what gets people motivated, what demotivates people, what hurts their response. And it sometimes pains me to hear some of the problems going on in the volunteer firehouses around the country. But then I get reinvigorated because I hear so many great stories of what great leaders are doing in their volunteer firehouse to build a highly motivated, energetic, and talented team. And that's what we're going to talk about in that presentation. And I'll be offering it to anybody that would like me to bring it their way. So if you're in the New York area, highly encourage you to check out the Pinsky Law Conference. Always a great conference. He always brings in great instructors. There's always great subjects. And it's March 27th to the 29th. So check that out. So this presentation about creating a culture, I like to say it certainly can help a volunteer firehouse. It can help with recruitment, but it can definitely help with retention, which they say is always harder than actually recruiting members. We want to keep them, but we also want to keep them motivated. We need them to be fired up for the work and get them to go to calls. And yeah, we know there's a lot of challenges out there. There's a lot of issues and problems facing the volunteer fire service. Some are completely out of our control. And quite frankly, some are in our control. And we can spend hours talking about these challenges. And in fact, we have spent a lot of hours on podcasts talking about them over the years. And some out there are predicting we're beyond fixing the volunteer fire service. The demise is at hand. Folks, I remember people saying that back in the 80s. I'm dating myself here. I got into service in 82. I'm a backstep club member. I rode the backstep. People were saying back then, within 10 years, the volunteer fire service is going to be gone. Now, do we have challenges? Absolutely. Can we fix some things? Yes. Are some out of our control? Maybe. But no doubt with these challenges, and you all know what they are: declining membership, aging workforce, increased and unprecedented call volume. It just goes on and on. But one of the common complaints I hear is one I think we can work on fixing, and that is, why are people not turning out for alarms? Many times at conferences and people send me emails, we can't get people to respond. So we're going to talk a little bit about that on this episode. And we're going to focus to start with on one area that, as I talk to people across the country, has definitely burned them out. And when the alarm goes off, they're sloughing it off. They're turning the pager off. They're resetting that alarm. And that's responses to those pesky, but you will have to admit, very important fire alarm activations, the automatic alarms. Those can really burn our members out over and over again, especially those ones that seem to come in at the same place all the time. That group home, that senior center, that business, the house with the outdated system, right? People aren't taking steps to maybe move a detector, so the food sets it off when they're cooking constantly. And it leads to the very complacent attitude. It's common, but we might be able to take some steps to fix that. Because if we don't, we're going to burn our members out. And what's the answer sometimes? Go to AutoAid. Let's send 2 or 3 companies to these alarms. So now we're burning out even more members, and that lackadaisical response filters through to other departments. So I was talking to my friend, our guest here on this podcast, Jerry Knapp, about this, and he shared an article with me that he wrote. Matter of fact, it was just in Fire Engineering just a while back. It's called Fire Alarm Activations: Thoughts on Fixing Systems That Cry Wolf. So I decided to invite Jerry onto the show tonight to, number one, share his thoughts on things we might be able to do to cut down on the nuisance and repeat alarm activations, and maybe also get his input on things going on in our volunteer fire service that are impacting our response, that maybe are preventing members or not. Members aren't as motivated to respond, to turn out to calls, and some of the morale issues that maybe are affecting the volunteer fire service and contributing to that. And he's certainly well qualified to talk about all of these. He's been in the fire service since 1973. He's the chief of the Rockland County, New York hazmat team. And he's a training officer at the Rockland County Fire Training Center in Pomona, New York. He's been a firefighter since 1973. He's also in the West Haverstraw, New York Fire Department, and he's been there and involved, and he's done so much. He's co-authored books for fire engineering, and he's written numerous articles, and I'm pleased to welcome him onto the show here today. Jerry, welcome aboard.
Tom, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure talking with you and being on the show here.
I appreciate you taking the time. And what I always like to do at the beginning of the show is let my guests tell the listeners a little bit about themselves. What got you in the fire service? Are you first generation? any career experience if you're a volunteer, things like that. Tell us a little bit about who Jerry Knapp
Sure.
is. Where do you come from?
Well, I come from Garnerville, New York, which is the home of nothing. My dad was a firefighter, so I guess you could say, actually, my grandfather was the chief of the department. My dad was captain, and my brother was in before me. So I'm, I guess, 2.5 or 3.5 generation firefighter. And my son was in after me. He did a great job until he moved away. So I've been a volunteer for, I hate to say it, 50 years. I had hair when I started. Currently chief of the Rockland County Hazmat team. Been in that position about 12 years now. A lot of fun doing hazmat. A little bit different, obviously, than the fire service. Started as a volunteer. Worked for 2 years as a career guy at the Military Academy at West Point. Had a lot of great experiences there. Did actually some parachuting there. Jumped out of Army helicopters for a while. So that was a hell of a lot of fun. Actually, last Thursday was the 13th anniversary of a natural gas explosion. It almost killed my captain and I. We were operating a routine, what we thought was a routine natural gas leak. And anyway, the building took off and it was just shredded. And what saved our lives was we were far enough away from the building that we got picked up and put down on the ground. And we're close enough that the overpressure did that for us, and major parts of the building went past us. So last week was a good week. Every day is a good day. So that's kind of where I'm at. We had a lot of lessons learned from that, Tom, and I've been going around the country like you, teaching my tactical response to natural gas emergencies. I'm actually doing an FDIC. We're doing 4 workshops, 4-hour workshops. So if anybody wants to come and kind of fill out your training for natural gas emergencies, stop by. We'll do some hands-on. We'll do some tabletop demonstrations. We'll spend a lot of time with instruments. It's been a great program. We've been to South Dakota. We've been to Kansas. We've been to Maine. We've been kind of all over the Northeast. So what we've learned is there's a gap in our training, and I thought I knew what I was doing in a natural gas emergency, and there were about 10 things that I did not know. It was just because I wasn't trained. And again, I thought I knew what I was doing like most other guys. So we have a grant. We can do that free for any department that wants it. We can fit into the schedule.
It is great information. And listeners, I think you were on last year. Well, last year was 2024. So you were on my podcast. It was either in 23 or possibly 22. We talked about natural gas emergencies. So it's in my archives, listeners. You can search through all my podcasts on my website, theprofessionalvolunteerfiredepartment.com. They're also on YouTube, all archived by date, and I have a title for everyone, so it's easy to find. And I think back to, I had Chief Mike Lombardo on not long ago when we did a podcast back in the fall, focusing on the new book by Frank Lieb and Billy Goldfeder about 30 Fires You Must Know, and everyone was giving advice as we wrapped it up. And Mike focused on explosions, gas explosions, because he talked about the Buffalo, New York propane explosion that killed 5 firefighters. But I found one simple piece of advice he gave, which I bet not a lot of people do. And when he said it, you're like, yeah. So for a natural gas call, investigation call, don't park in front of the address. Stay back.
Exactly. I call it the kill box. If things go bad, that's the area around the building where you're likely to get killed. It's simple. We know it's the collapse zone, right? Right. But I go to departments, career volunteer. I go, you get called to 3 Main Street for a gas leak. Where do you park? Oh, right in front.
Yeah.
And the other kind of headbanger for me was, you go into a release of an explosive gas. Have a little respect for it. You don't need to pull on a block and start evacuating everybody. But for God's sake, have a little respect that you're going to release an explosive gas.
Yeah.
I just consulted with NIOSH. There was a gas explosion in, I forget, it was Maryland or Virginia. And the volunteer captain is in the front yard, and the propane tank in the back takes off, and he was instantly killed. So again, just having a little respect. I don't know if there was anything different you could do. I always, when I teach a class, I go, if you have a weapon in your hand, you don't look down the barrel of the gun, right? So you have a little respect for it. So kind of the same thing.
And it can be a it can be taken so lightly, right? They can be taken. You can get such complacency with natural gas calls, as well as the next subject we're going to talk about. And you and I were talking a while back, and you pointed out this article you authored about fire alarm activations and thoughts on fixing systems that cry wolf. Was it the May edition, I think, of Fire Engineering that it was in Volunteers Corner, right?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah,
Tom, yep.
Our listeners can grab that. But what got you writing that article? Because I think what you struck me is you and I were talking one day about how we got to motivate our members, and this subject came up. So I have a feeling that had something to do with it. But what led you writing this article?
Well, I just get so tired of going to the same place, like all the listeners, right? You go to the same place for the same false alarm for the same reason, and there's a bunch of them. We can go through the list, like steam from a shower, right? So the codes say the smoke detector has to be in the vicinity of the bedrooms or between the bedrooms, whatever it might say, right? But what happens? Somebody takes a hot shower, the steam, they don't turn the fan on in the bathroom, right? So the steam comes out and you got a false alarm, right? So why don't we move the detector? And I had a conversation with one of the fire inspectors, and he's like, oh, no, we can't possibly do that because the code says blah, blah, blah. Well, I understand that, but who wrote the code? We did. So why can't we change it? Or why can't we put a head in there? And one of the other scenarios I talk about, they go, for God's sake, we're flying a helicopter on Mars, right? But we can't make a smoke detector that does a false alarm for steam, or we can't change where that detector is. So I think there's a bigger problem. When we go through all these scenarios, Tom, I think the issue is that I think there's some leadership failures, maybe in our own department, and then more important, I think above us, why isn't the fire inspector worried about false alarms, right? Because his boss isn't on him to say, hey, fix the false alarms, because we're wearing out the fire department, right?
I was going to say, what's the problem if we don't fix it? Like, what, I think what happens is chiefs and that will go to these calls and, they're quick. They want to get out of there. Oh, good. I'll be home in 5 minutes. And, but what if we don't address this problem? What if we just keep going and going? What's the bigger problem? We're burning our members.
Yeah. So just kind of as you spoke before, we're wearing our guys out. And I think there's a real motivation issue, right? Why should a volunteer his or her time to go to an alarm that you kind of almost know is false? And the key is that the occupant, the fire inspector, the mayor, the town official isn't doing anything. So why should I care if nobody else cares?
Right.
So we've had this discussion in my firehouse. And of course, the answer is, well, just an automatic alarm could be a real fire. I absolutely agree. And that's exactly the point. So now, because you've been there so many times for false alarms that we could fix, but we didn't, now it really is a fire, and there's two guys on the rig. Now they're in danger in their lives. They're gonna hang it out there, try to make a rescue or extinguish the fire. They got no backup, right? So I think we need to look at the bigger picture and go, we're responsible for fire protection. Let's take a step back and see how we can fix this.
Right. And we're absolutely not saying that fire alarm protection systems aren't important. We're not saying we shouldn't be going to these alarms. So I want to just make sure that we understand how important they are, and we understand that we have a duty and obligation to respond to them. But at the same time, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to acknowledge that Joe and Jane, citizen volunteer firefighter, are home, and that call comes in for the third time that night, third time that week, third time that month, and they're thinking, why should I go to this alarm again when it's continuously been steam from the shower or something like that? So there's a dichotomy. We've got to figure out a way to solve this problem. Go ahead.
And Tom, it's not working right now for fire protection. You send, just because the red rig pulls up in front of the house or the building, doesn't mean there's a crew there. Maybe there's two guys. Maybe there's three. Maybe there's an older guy and a probie. I say Slappy and Pappy. You got Slappy who's 17 and Pappy who's 70, right?
No disrespect to any of them.
Exactly. No disrespect to anyone, but that's not a fire department. That's not a fire company, you know?
Right.
So I'd like to look at workers in the building. I think that's a good example. We've all been to that. They're cutting sheetrock. They're sanding the floor, right? So maybe we enlist the help of, and I think our leaders need to look at this too, because like I live in a village, right? The fire department is not responsible for providing fire protection. The village board is ultimately responsible. Now, obviously, they formed a fire department and we go to fires. But so let's say we run Granny over with the engine going to a false alarm, right? Fire department's not paying 1 cent. Who's going to pay? The village board is going to pay, right? And they're going to pay with tax money. So let's kind of look at workers in the building. Can our fire inspectors, before we issue, so in my case, the village, right, issues a building permit. Before they do that, can the fire inspector, or can we run a 5-minute video or whatever, showing that contractor how to cover the smoke detector so when he's sanding the floor, he doesn't trip the smoke detector, right? Maybe that's a condition of getting his license as a contractor or for the building permit, right? So now we've got, just like fire prevention, we're really good at fire prevention. Why can't we do false alarm prevention? And then I don't think that's on the fire department. I think that's on the code enforcement people, right?
Absolutely. And, I work at the fire alarm office, and it's unbelievable how many calls we dispatch for just that thing. Or technicians working on a panel without taking it out of service and calling the monitoring company, or in some cases, my office, because we monitor 80 alarms throughout our town, to say, I'm working on the system here. If it comes in, do not dispatch the fire company. And then we always say, we don't take a time frame. You call us when you're done. Is that easy to fix? I think so, but there's a disconnect there.
So, as I get older and grouchier and I'm retired, I have time to think about this stuff. We're seeing leadership failures in the fire service, right? Not only at our company and department level, but above us, right? So in my case, why isn't the mayor after the fire inspector to stop these false alarms, right? So let's look at smoking in the bathroom, right? We have a shopping center and we go there frequently because, Billy Bob is having a cigarette while he's sitting on the crapper. I mean, let's face it, that's what's going on, right? So we go in there, there's 2 smoke detectors and there's a sprinkler head. So, I mentioned, I go, look, why don't we take out the smoke detectors and we can fix that false alarm problem? Oh, no, there might be a fire. I go, you know what? Take a giant step back. I don't know how many people die. There's several thousand people die a year, but they ain't dying on the crapper in the bathroom at ShopRite, right? So at some point, we've got to put a little common sense in. And by the way, if the kid goes in there and decides he's going to set the plastic garbage can on fire, make a smoke deal, guess what? The sprinkler head is going to take care of it. So I think we just got to apply some common sense and get these things fixed.
Yeah,
Sounds easy.
No, but you're right. And again, not discounting the fact that when they go off, we have a duty and obligation. We just want people to stay motivated to go to these calls.
Sure.
I know in my tenure as chief of department, I was just doing the math here. I can think of 3 right off the bat, 3 working fires that started off in my 5-year term as chief of department as a fire alarm activation. So fires do happen. We're not saying that the alarm doesn't do its job. It's the nuisance alarms that we need to, I think, as a fire service, seriously address. So you've mentioned a couple. The workers in the building, that to me is the easiest one to address. Cover the smoke heads properly. Call the alarm in and out of service. You've mentioned steam from a shower, smoking in the bathroom. How about the other common one? And is there a way to solve the food on the stove? How many false alarms do we go to? But that smoke, it could be, you're going to what if it to death. But let's talk about just the pot that boiled over, the steam that's causing this alarm. And in some cases, at the same address on a regular basis.
So again, maybe some fire prevention for that family or for that group home, right? Maybe they need to be taught to cook a little bit better, or a little safer. So I would ask our listeners to think about it in terms of fire prevention, right? And again, going back to our code officials, if the smoke detector is right outside the kitchen door, man, can we move it? You know, I mean, it just, we're not meeting our mission of providing fire protection for those people in that house. Like you said, Tom, when they do have a real fire and two guys show up, you know, we're not meeting our assigned mission, you know,
Right.
and again, it needs to get beyond us. I think our fire guys, I mean, we as fire guys and gals, we understand it. I don't think our village officials do, our town officials. It's just not their thing, right?
Right.
So I think it's up, again, a leadership thing for our leaders to go up the chain of command and say, hey, boss, look, we're having this problem. And I think the other thing is, look, nobody wants to admit we're having a problem. Right? One of the neat things about hazmat, and this kind of ties into what we're talking about. When I first came into hazmat, I had two of the greatest hazmat guys I ever knew. And I hear them talking in the call and like, I don't know, man, I don't know. I'm like, what did I get myself into? These guys, you know, here we are at this dangerous call, and they're like, they don't know. To their credit, there was things about the chemicals that were involved that they didn't know. We researched and found out. And so it's kind of the same thing now with our leaders, right? If we're having a problem, we need to be honest and go, hey, look, I got this problem. Here's how I think we solve it. I'm not really sure. Maybe somebody else got some better ideas, but it's got to go up the chain of command. I worked at West Point. My day job, I always had a military boss, Lieutenant Colonel or higher, and Colonel McKinnon. He mentored me. It was great. He said, look, bad news doesn't get better with age. He said, if you find something bad, let me know. We'll figure it out. You know, I was going to say we'll fess up to it, but not even that. If it's our mistake,
Yeah.
you might as well fess up to it, right?
Right.
Because the more you hide it, then not only do you have the problem, then you're like, hey, you covered it up. But, you know, so then you got two strikes.
Right.
So it's up to us. We're having a problem getting people out. We need to fess up and go, we need to do something different. There's no shame in it. You know?
Right. It's easy to say it's your duty, it's your obligation, you should go. But remember, this is the podcast that we dedicate to the volunteer fire service. You got to somehow motivate your volunteers, and they have to feel useful, and they don't want to feel that their time is being wasted. And again, alarms we treat as a fire until proven otherwise. But as volunteers, there's only so much time they're going to give you. And after a few of those cry wolves, when it's the real one, you might turn around and see the truck pulling up with one person on it or two people on it, like you said, you know, 17 and 70. The other thing is, from a leadership standpoint, most chiefs belong to some type of organization in their area with other chiefs and fire service officials. Hopefully they're having productive, regular meetings. We should be doing so, talking about issues and challenges. This is a challenge. This is an issue that can be brought up and discussed, and as a group, take it to the next level. Let's discuss these things. Now, I know staffing is going to be an issue in some areas. Maybe they're very poorly funded. Maybe there is no code enforcement, but there still should be some method of working with others in other agencies to address the issue in your area.
I'm getting kind of crass about this. We have some problems, like all fire departments and teams, right? And I say I can't find anybody that cares. One of the things I learned working for the Army for 30 years is if the project has command interest, if the boss cares, it's probably going to get done. So, Tom, what you say is exactly right. If we get together with our peers, let's just say our fire chiefs and fire officers, right? We identify a problem. We're really good at that, but we're not good at taking it to the next level for whatever reason. I think it's leadership issues in the volunteer fire service. Guys haven't been officers, right? Great guys on a fire ground, but they've not been taught how to do a briefing, take it up to the next level to go, hey, boss, here's what we got. Here's what I think the problem is. Here's a couple courses of action. It takes a little skill to do that, you know? So, you know, if we're talking about where to put the hose line or where to cut the vent hole, we're really good at that. We are really good at that. But as volunteers, we haven't been taught that management skill to do that and practice it, right? And it's in Fire Officer 1, there's like a little bit of it, right? I'll give you an example. We had a guy, he was a little bit handicapped, but he was pretty high up in we'll say a company, a very successful company, right? and he was our president. And Mike ran our company very successfully, and a lot of the success of the company in my department. There's two companies in my department. We're doing really well. We've been doing really well for a long while. It's because of his leadership, and he did his business management. He had that training, and he brought that to the firehouse at the president level, and he helped out the officers with that kind of stuff. I remember, I forget what the issue was, but he called me in the office one day. He goes, "We got to talk." I'm like, "Sure, Mike." I was doing something, I forget what it was, but it was a professional conversation. It wasn't personal. It was, Tom, you shouldn't be doing that shit anymore, And what does that do? That turns people off, right? But Mike used that experience that he's got and that management training to correct my behavior, frankly, right? And he kept me on his side instead of being, adversarial, like, screw this company, I'm not coming here anymore. This goes beyond volunteers. We're not getting the leadership training. I always say, we take a guy, right, a good firefighter, and we make him lieutenant. Well, he's got a whole bunch of problems that he's not trained to deal with, right? I know I talked to some guys and some officers, and the one guy said to me, he goes, the guy come into my office, he slammed the door, he goes, "I'm getting divorced. I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to shoot myself." So here's this young lieutenant. Now he's dealing with potential suicide, and he's like way over his head. Not his fault, right?
Right.
But it's kind of an example of what goes on.
No, you're so right. You're so right. And I remember when I was chief, the knock on the door comes, and I've had everything from, and I'm sure this is shared by chiefs throughout the country. You get the knock on the door about, I'm getting divorced, I lost my job, I think I'm an alcoholic, I got cancer, whatever it is. And they come to you. Actually, I think you'll agree with me. When they come to you, that's a great sign. It shows they respect you, they trust you. You don't want to breach that trust. That's a subject for another day, but that is a good sign. And I agree 100%. And we've talked about it a lot of times on this podcast, and I want to get you back because we're going to talk about it on another podcast. Maybe the next one is I'll figure out my schedule, and that's leadership training. Now, in defense of our brother and sister chief officers out there, our brother and sister lieutenants and captains and presidents and board of directors, they only have so much time to give. And in some cases, especially in the understaffed departments that are really hurting for members, they're treading water. They're barely keeping their head above water with everything else they're doing, responding to the calls, training for the calls, and trying to run their department administratively, pay the bills, keep the minutes, comply with all the rules and regs, get audited, whatever it is. So now this training opportunity comes up for leadership training, management training, even if it's online. They're exhausted. That weekend, they've got to go to the Little League game. They're traveling for a sports team. Their boss at work has a project that's due next week. So, sorry, that leadership training class is being offered this weekend at the local academy. I ain't going. It ain't easy. We're not saying it is easy. But all I ask of our listeners, and I think you would agree, is you've got to at least recognize that your natural skills and talents, which got you elected or appointed as a chief, a president, a lieutenant. Yeah, you're a great firefighter, great administrator of business, so you can be president. It's not always enough, and you can always learn to get better. Most of the great leaders throughout history learned how to be a good leader. It didn't come naturally for them. I'm not saying, and I know you're not saying you have to go to these classes. You've got to,
no, not at all.
Got to at least read. There's a lot of great books out there. Bookshelf behind me is filled, and you know what? They could be fire books, military books, political books, business books, a lot of leadership lessons out there but you at least got to acknowledge, I can get better. I got to learn how to motivate 30 people, 20 people, 40 people of all different ages, all different interests, all different. Everyone joins the department for a different reason too. You got to learn what makes them tick, and your one approach to all is not going to work.
So two thoughts. One is that guy trained hard to be a good fireman. Why doesn't he or she continue that to be a good officer? Right? That's just something that, like you said, time and all the rest of it, I got it. But if I just landed from Mars and I saw Joe went to all these training classes to be a good firefighter because he wanted to be a lieutenant, then he didn't further his education to be a lieutenant, captain, or officer, right? Something's wrong with that. And I don't want to get into that. But let's take this back to false alarms, right? So I'll tell you honestly, and this isn't a conversation I was proud of, but my assistant chief called a department meeting. There's probably 30 guys there. He goes, "What? Look, you guys got to come to automatic alarms. You got to come to smells and bells. Why aren't you coming?" Crickets in a room. Nobody wanted to say anything, right? So me being me, I said, "I'll tell you why." I said, "I'm not coming until I see the fire inspector, until I see you guys pass it up the chain of command that we have a problem, that the fire inspector and the people responsible for fire protection start to do something."
Mm-hmm.
Right? What do you want them to do? And it's things we just talked about. Train the workmen in the building. Train the fire alarm tech. And I hate to say it, but there's a punishment side to this too. So after fire alarm tech, trips 3 or 4 or 5 false alarms, maybe it's time to cost that company some money to get their attention. And that's the last thing we want to do. But I'm sorry, hey, you run through the stop sign, you're going to get a ticket, right? The other thing is that my second point, Tom, was this: is that my boss at work, we were talking about leadership, and he goes, "I don't have to love you." I go, "You're my boss." He goes, "But I have to make you believe that I love you." So I'm thinking about this, right? So this goes back to the false alarm thing, right? If I keep getting beat with a stick, you got to come to these false alarms, I'm losing love, right? But if the chief says, "Hey, Jerry, look, we're working with whoever it might be. We've met with 3 alarm companies. They understand now that they're going to call. The village board has passed a resolution saying that if after 3 false alarms from that ABC alarm company, they get fined $100. Jerry, we're doing something. We love you. We want you to stay here," right? I think that's the kind of love that we've got to. And love's the wrong word, but you get the idea.
Oh yeah,
it can't be a one-sided street for all the reasons you just talked about.
Right.
As a volunteer, I got plenty of other things to do, but if I'm taken advantage of, sorry, and that's a hard thing to say. Look, I've been a fireman 50 years, right? It's like everybody listening, it's in our blood, but at some point you bleed out.
Yeah, 2 points on that. So number one is, I don't have to love you, but I have to make it appear I love you. There's a great leadership lesson, because I equate it to, we all have, when you're in a leadership position, you're always going to have those members that come up to you and tell you their ideas. And I've seen it and you've seen it. And there's 2 ways to handle it: respectfully, listening. Even if in your mind you're saying, there ain't no way in hell that I'm going to do this idea. Or even if you think to yourself, this person is a bleep, 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 bleep. You smile, you repeat back to them what they want to do, you acknowledge it, you respect them. Even if you're not respecting them internally, you respect them. Because even if that idea is crazy, you know what? Their next one might not be. And if you treat them poorly and do what we've all seen, that's the stupidest. You're an idiot. My God, why do you say that? They ain't going to bring you any more ideas. And you know what? They ain't going to be leaving their house maybe to go to many calls, because you didn't motivate them. And that's part of your job as a successful fire department officer.
Mm-hmm.
There's another. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The other thing, back to your fining them. My town has what we call an avoidable alarm ordinance, and we start fining after 3 false alarms. The chief can term it avoidable, and there's penalties built in at different levels, and they finally get fined, and that money goes into a fund to help support the fire service in our town. It's administered by a certain group, but requests can be put in for fire-related purchases, and that helps. Dichotomy there, though, is people will disconnect alarms rather than take them out of service or have them service. They'll just take them out of service if you're not staying on top of the businesses out there. So there is a dichotomy. And the other dichotomy is being back to how you treat people. You don't want to be yelling and screaming at the business owner or homeowner. Yes, it's the fourth time you've been there in a week, fifth time, because you know what? They'll disconnect their alarm too. And you're also painting your picture as anything but a professional organization. So.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be respectful, and that's not the way to do it. The way you have it set up as an ordinance, it's above our level as firefighters. You know, I love that homeowner. You know, I'd risk my life to save him, but you know, if his alarm is malfunctioning, that's above our level, I think, right?
Right.
I want to mention something else. We have, for example, a hospital in our first due area. It's a fire-resistant building. Actually, it's probably classified as a Type 1 fireproof building. It's fully sprinkled. It's fully alarmed. It has a full guard staff on duty 24 hours a day. Obviously, the nurses' stations are always staffed. So one of the things I suggested was, let's put a delay on that alarm. You know, let's give.
You can't do that. Right? I mean, what if?
What if there's a fire and Slappy and Pappy are the only guys that show up? We've not met the mission, right? So I don't know if that's the right answer, but maybe we look at across the country. Is that successful? I know a department right near me did that for years, and it was fine, you know. So that kind of leads me into the other thing is that you talk about people disconnecting the alarm. You know, like I think we think a little too highly of ourselves. If I'm not responsible as a firefighter, I'm not responsible for your house. If you're dope and you want to burn your house down and you want to disconnect your alarm, I'm sorry. The reality of it is, I'm very sorry. I disagree with that. I think, you know, you haven't complied with the fire prevention stuff that we try to teach you, but the homeowners, the building owners have to have some responsibility, right? So I've done 7 searches in my career. I'm sorry, I've done 9 searches in my career. 7 of those times, there was nobody in the building, but there was always a reliable report that somebody was in the building, right? So we always believe people that, you know, there may be somebody in the building, and there is somebody in the building, but we never believe them if they say everybody's out. And this goes back to your, oh my God, you know, Billy Bob could be sleeping over and I forgot about it. I got it, and then it happens, right? But it's the same. I take a shower and I set my alarm off. Why can't I call you up, Tom, as dispatcher? Hey, Tom, I took a shower. Sorry. That's all it is, right? No, what do? If we could, in my department, we get tapped out to a structure fire. There's 3 engines, a truck, and a rescue coming, a fast team, and maybe an additional pumper, right? Depending on the time of day. Think about the dangers of running those rigs, you know, code 3 to a structure fire. When the guy's standing there with the towel wrapped around him going, I told you guys that I did it, you know? So there's got to be some, I think we've got to, fire protection, there's some responsibility of the building owner as well.
Right.
Where you draw that line is up to you, but we'll take care of everything. No, we're not.
Yeah. I've been involved in those conversations. I know we're going to get in trouble with some of the things we're saying here, but I agree with you. And I have had this discussion many times. And there are examples out there where the dispatch center or the fire company got a phone call saying it was nothing and they pulled up and had a working fire. I get that. It has happened. That's not on the fire department, though, if they decide to slow down. Yes, you still have a duty. Go check it out. But as you said, Jerry, do we need to be sending everybody lights and sirens when you have a backup phone call saying it's steam from the shower? It was dust from contractors. Where's the logic in still responding every truck, lights and sirens? Because you know what? I think when you're on the court stand and you're defending that driver that T-boned a car, when the lawyer says, explain to me why you still went lights and sirens with that third due engine that was coming from 6 miles away when there were reports that it was steam from a shower. You're going to have a hard time defending that. And how about just having some logical responses? Maybe only 1 rig goes lights and sirens. You know, maybe only 2 rigs, whatever it is. My area, it's our first out engine goes lights and sirens. I think our second does now as well. That was a change. But everything else goes no lights and sirens unless there's a compelling reason. Backup phone call reporting smoke. The dispatcher relays that. You upgrade the response. logical steps here that can be taken and help mitigate the liability on us.
Sure. So let's think about our police department. We have a wonderful police department, right? And most towns, the cops are going to get to the call first, to the address first, right? Because they're on the road. They're sitting there, Dunkin' Donuts or wherever they might be, right? So they're going to get there first. Why don't we believe them? Oh yeah, there's fire coming out the window. Okay, I got it. Oh no, steam from a shower. The cop's kind of a reliable guy, right? Now maybe we need to do a little training with him or her, right? So, if they've had a kitchen fire, maybe we need to explain to the cop and train him or her a little bit that, it can get up into the wall through the cabinets and, maybe the fire department should continue to come in. So I don't think we're using the resources that we have. I know in my town, I'm not slamming on anybody. We have the best cops, we have the best fire, and we have the best EMS in the world, right? We're terrible at working together. We don't dislike each other, but our leadership above us, the village and town supervisors, haven't really forced us to work together, right? So kind of a free solution there, right? A little bit of, again, kind of coming back to leadership and taking a giant step back and looking at the problem,
Mutual respect and cooperation.
Yeah, and use that resource that, hey, that cop is going to get there first. Hey, let's kind of show them how to do a little size up for us, Talk
to them about opening doors and closing doors, not keeping the door closed. Whatever it is. Don't block the eyes with all that stuff. But no, seriously, they're a resource. And I know there are people out there that will not take their word for it. We still have, still respond, but it's 99% chance that police officer is giving correct information. I'm sure someone's going to email us and let us know about the one time it wasn't. And that's fine. I get it. But that's not on you. You're taking the best information you have and acting accordingly. And I think the court of law is going to say that acting accordingly is if they're reporting nothing showing, just smoke from cooking or steam from a shower, slowing down is never even if you still want your first rig to go hot so a crew gets there in a timely manner. Yeah, absolutely. Slow everybody else down.
So how does all that come back to showing me some love and I'm going to come to the alarm, right? So if we get dispatched to a house fire or automatic alarm, whatever it might be, right? And the cop says, no, it's steam from a shower. If I'm on my way to the firehouse, I get there, the captain goes, we're not going, steam from a shower. I'll check in. I get a free check mark. I don't waste my time getting dressed, getting on a rig. We drive there, we come back, right? So the captain or chief or whoever it might be took care of me, took care of my time. Now I got to get home, like you said, the family and school and whatever else you got, right? So that guy, that boss, has showed me some love by taking care of me. I'm going to show him some love by coming the next time to the alarm.
Right.
Yeah. It's not that simple, but it kind of is that simple, So
and again, there'll be people out there that respond, and then you get the people that drive around the block until they do say, hold everything in quarters or whatever. And again, there's a dichotomy there. There comes a point where you have to be an honorable public servant, an honorable volunteer firefighter, and do the right thing. And then you don't drive around the block. And if you are, then you got bigger problems than what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Tom, I think you had talked about assigned shifts, and that may be a possible solution too. That if I know I have to respond from this time to that time, and then the rest of that week I don't have to go, that's showing me some love and makes my life better. And it also makes your department know that you got guys on the rig. You might want to talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
There's a couple, there's a lot of different ways of doing assigned shifts. Some, my department for the last few years now has been experimenting where people can sign up and serve shifts right at the firehouse. And there's others around the country where they sign in from home and they commit that this is going to be my shift from 6 p.m. till midnight, overnight, whatever it is. I am going to every call that comes in. In some departments now, that's how they operate. And with the I Am Responding and Active 911 apps and all the other apps that are out there, very easy for a command officer to look and say, oh, I got 3 or 4 people on duty tonight. whether it's at the firehouse or they're coming from home, you kind of know you're going to have a first out rig coming. And you're right, that might be a direction some departments need to go in. Not always possible everywhere, and it's not perfect. We're still struggling with perfecting it, but it's brought us a lot of new members because we're showing we appreciate their time. We're showing that we're trying new ideas. We're not stuck in the 50s where everyone's got to come from home. And we're honoring people's obligations who maybe have spouses operating or working opposite shifts. And as I said, maybe he or she coaches a little league or a hockey team, and there's always maybe I talked to one firefighter. I think it was in North Dakota. They were a farmer, and there's times during the season they're just not available. They're up from 5 a.m. out in the field till 7, 8, 9 at night. So for a month period, 2-3 month period, they can't make it work. But then they volunteer to serve other time. I will be around for the entire month or however they do it. The bottom line is you got to be flexible. The volunteer fire service of yesterday is not going to work for today. No. Yesterday was great, not discounting anything that was done. Wonderful people faced serious challenges, built these beautiful volunteer fire departments from scratch. But we can't be afraid to try something new, such as staffing.
Yeah. Two quick things. I taught in South Dakota. I've taught at their state fire academy every year. Great people, right? Mm-hmm. So we're doing an engine company class. So we got full gear on, and it's 100 degrees. Actually, it was 104. So finally I said to the guy, I go, Charlie, why in the hell do you do this time of year? He said, we're all farmers. In the spring, we're planting. In the fall, we're harvesting. You don't want to be here in the winter. So this is our slack time, Right. And to their credit, those people out there in 100-degree weather, training hard,
Yeah.
So, I forgot what else I was going
to. Don't worry about that, Ed. So I want to circle back a minute here to fire alarms. We started talking about one thing that might be hurting getting butts in the seats on the fire trucks. Just one thing. And there's a lot more we could talk about. We're going to save that for another day. But let's circle back to the fire alarm problem. First of all, we have to acknowledge it is a problem. And then I actually had someone say to me once, you don't think it was a problem in the 70s with the box alarms and all the pole boxes? You read, report from Engine Company 82. I get that. Urban area, I understand in a native duty obligation, and they responded honorably and answered every single call. That's great. They're at the firehouse. How do we get our volunteers to leave home? Because it might be a fire. Absolutely not discounting that. That's why we need people to go, but they're not going if it's the cry wolf syndrome. So again, there's steps we can take and things we can do. Understand it's a problem. Auto aid is certainly not the answer. Yes, I know everyone's hurting for people power, but auto aid for false alarms is going to just that lackadaisical attitude is going to spread to other companies. They're not going to come for that auto aid. And then when it is a fire, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. Big time. Yeah. Take the steps, be proactive, show some leadership, work with the business owner, work with the homeowner, work with your officials, whether it's code enforcement, building department, elected officials, saying we need to change how we're doing things in our area. Fining is one thing, but again, you got to be careful with that. Go ahead, Jerry.
And when you go up the chain of command like that, it's not an adversarial, hey, Mayor, you got to do something about this.
Right.
It's, hey, Mayor, we both have this common mission here. Let's be sure we're doing it, make sure we're meeting the goals of what we're supposed to do. And I think one of the reasons, and again, I think this comes back to leadership training. One of the things I think we're all afraid of is failure. So real quick, I have a friend, he's a retired research chemist, and I'll give him an idea. His name is Dan Moran. He was the chief in Suffern Fire Department, and he was our deputy coordinator. Great guy. Danny has never said, no, let's not try that. He's like, let's try it. You never know what's going to happen. So to your point of, the assigned shifts, I brought that up, and just like you said, the answer is, that'll never work here. Well, if it works in, someplace else, why doesn't it work here? And you know what? It might not work here, and that's okay. We have the failure is your failure to try, right? Like we when I worked at West Point, I was in this middle management program, and we got a ton of training. And so one of the things that we learned to do was identify a problem, come up with, we call them courses of action, right? So I'd go to my boss, who was a colonel, and go, hey, sir, here's the problem. And I know if I didn't come up with course of action number real quick, he'd go, well, Mr. Knapp, what do you recommend, right? Which is exactly the right answer. I'd say, sir, here's the problem. We could do this, we can do this, or we can do this. And we were taught always to give 3 recommendations. He goes, okay, which one are you going to throw out? I go, course of action number 3. I don't think it'll work. I go, number 2, probably will work, but my recommendation is let's try number 1, right? Now, the other part about that is collaboration. So typically there'd be other people at our level in the group, right, in the staff meeting. And then, so I go, okay, here's what I recommend, bingity, bingity, bing. And somebody else would go, well, yeah, that's great. But if you do this kind of a little bit different, it could be better. And I go, oh yeah, I never really thought about that. So this idea of training, we as volunteer firefighters, we're really good at what we do. And it should be, there's a lot of, to our credit, that's really good. We need to be able to go, okay, this isn't going so good. Here's some things we may be able to do different, and taking that up the chain and getting it fixed. Because one of the things that we have a group now, it's called the Sitting Chiefs, right? So there's 26 departments in my county, and we meet once a month. And frankly, it ends up sometimes being a bitch session, and everybody's getting tired of. If we can't get those issues to the next level, right? If it has no command interest, it's going to be a bitch session, right? So again, here's the problem, clearly define the problem. Here's A solution, here's B solution, here's C solution, and the best solution, like you say, it may not work, but we've tried, and then maybe it'll take you to something, but you can't be afraid to fail. You just cannot be. Like I said, Dan was a research chemist. Now he held a number of different patents for chemical formulas. How many times do you think he failed, right, before he found what worked? A lot. Right? Yeah. So my wife and I were at Thomas Edison's place is about 40 miles away from us. We were there not long ago, and his laboratories and stuff were all about failure. Mm-hmm. And then he kept trying until he found something that worked. So kind of the same for us,
Yeah. And I know there's some predicting the demise of the volunteer fire service, but you know what? There's a lot of areas of the country they're just going to depend on volunteer fire departments. So let's work on things we can do to make sure we're getting those that we do have, keeping them motivated and keeping them getting in the seats. And for this episode, for the most part, we're focusing on those fire alarm activations. And we're not saying we're not going to go. We have a duty and obligation. We are going to go. We just want to try and get as many people to go as possible. And then quickly, if we could just review, if we do identify a problem, if we continue to go to the same type of alarm at the same place over and over again, treat the homeowner or business owner or contractor with respect, but work with them to address the problem. Problem number 1 that we see a lot, steam from the shower. What can we do as a quick review, Jerry, for steam from a shower?
Sure. There's a couple things. If the homeowner calls in and says, no, it's steam from a shower, we can respect that, that call. Get with the code official and think about moving that smoke head maybe away from the bathroom door. The other thing is, it's kind of simple. If there's a bathroom fan, if the light's on, the fan comes on at the same time. So if the person is in there taking a shower, the fan's running, sucking the steam out, and it never gets to the head.
Yeah.
Just.
Yep. Workers in the building all the time. Failed to notify. Contractors dust.
Fire prevention ahead of the game. Train the contractors maybe before they're issued a license or before they're issued a building permit. Maybe the fire inspector goes and talks to them for 10 minutes. Maybe he shows them a video. Maybe they have to sign on and prove that they've watched the video on YouTube or something. But they got to understand. And again, with all of these, if they're frequent flyers, it costs them money.
And maybe if you do get that alarm there, you take the time to talk to them in a professional manner about what they should do next time to prevent it. Even putting a sticker. I've seen stickers on alarm panels. Make sure you call this number before servicing the system. That's worked as well. Smoking.
You know, something along those lines. Maybe a sticker on how many times we go to the homeowners changing batteries, right?
Right.
Maybe during fire prevention, instead of giving out, little smoky bears, we give out put this on your thing, upon your smoke detector to remind you, hey, call Billy Bob, call whoever before you change the battery. Yeah.
And of course, smoking in the bathrooms or smoke from cooking. Anything we can do there to try and address the problem, to cut down.
It's pretty site specific. For example, like I said before, if there's a sprinkler head in the bathroom, I'm not sure we need a smoke detector. If it's near the kitchen, again, moving the smoke detector, or maybe getting a less sensitive detector in there.
Yeah.
Common sense stuff.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are a lot of bathrooms that don't have a sprinkler, that they just have a smoke head. So, but, and I know transients have gone, it's going to happen, but there are still things that can be done in some circumstances. So, and then trusting a reliable source. We're still going to respond. I'm not discounting that, but if you get information that it's not an actual fire, take the prudent steps. If anything, it's just going to be the right thing to do from a legal standpoint. You still have a duty and obligation to go, but you're acting on the best information you're getting. And if somebody errs, be it a police officer, be it a civilian, be it the alarm company, you're just going on their information. You are just still responding, just reducing your response mode a little bit to try and arrive alive, as they say.
Yeah. I know the St. Louis Fire Department years ago was having a problem with accidents, and for automatic alarms, they just I think the first rig went lights and sirens, and everybody else just obeyed all the traffic rules.
Yeah, they're the poster child for it. It's over 20 years, I believe. As far as I know, no buildings burned down that weren't going to burn down beforehand by following that policy. I know that's been followed. That's been followed around the country. Like I said, my department adopted it well over 15 years ago for alarm calls. And again, we're not discounting the importance of going to the calls. It's just when statistics prove that the majority of them are accidental or due to a malfunction of some type, it's the prudent thing to do. And it might help keep your members motivated for when they do come in. And that's what we want to do in our volunteer firehouses.
I think there's some business management that applies here as well. If we were, we always say, it could be a fire, so we always go balls to the wall, The businessman would look at it like Trump would look at it and go, all right, we've done it 1,000 times. There's only once been a fire. Do we need to change a little bit? Do we need to think about a change,
Yeah. So
again, going back to that leadership, maybe we need to apply some business type practices to what we're doing. Sensibly, of course.
An interesting subject for certain. A very interesting subject, and probably going to get some comments on it. Maybe some disagreeing with us, but we're just trying to keep our members motivated and keep them rolling to the calls. And Jerry's seen it, I've seen it, and I'm sure our listeners are experiencing it as well. We're having trouble motivating people getting out and going to calls, all types of calls. For tonight's purposes, we focused on the fire alarm and how that can burn members out. So, Jerry, thank you so much. Any final tips or takeaways you'd like to provide the listeners with before we sign off?
I was hoping you were going to ask that. Show them some love. Show them some love however you can, and they'll give it back to you.
Yep. And that gets back to the leadership like we talked about. We're going to do another podcast getting your take on things you can do to show them that love, because some of it's pretty easy. But it begins with you looking in the mirror and saying, I can get better. It begins by you trying to get some additional training, maybe reading some of the books that are out there to help in those areas. And Jerry, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, talk to you more about some of the ideas that you have, or get some of your experience, or maybe even talk to you about natural gas emergencies or gas emergencies, how can they best get a hold of you?
Sure. I'm retired, so you can get a hold of me at jknapp23 at AOL, the letter J for Jerry, my last name, Knapp, Knapp, numerals 23 at AOL. My cell phone's always on, 845-558-0489. if you're interested in a free tactical response natural gas emergencies training program. I say natural gas, it does, we do propane as well. So the response procedures are basically the same. Natural gas goes up, propane goes down, but the response procedures, the metering and that kind of stuff is pretty much the same. So I'd be happy to do that for you. Schedule's getting busy, but give me a call, send me an email. I'd be happy to talk to you. And I appreciate that offer, Tom, that it's always good to talk to the brothers and sisters. And that's why I like FDIC. I learned 10 times more than I put out there. You know?
Absolutely.
100 times probably.
And speaking of FDIC, tell them again about your class. You're doing 4 workshops?
Monday and Tuesday of FDIC. I'm doing 2.
Change for them this year.
Yeah, they're getting the money's worth, you know. I'm doing 2 Monday morning, Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon. They're listed as 4 hours. It'll probably be about 3. We'll have plenty of time. I got 2 people helping me, a firefighter from West Yellowstone, Montana, who was involved in a motel explosion, and Tim Pillsworth, past chief here in Orange County. You know Tim. So Tim's an engineer, so he brings that engineer perspective to it, and about, you know, buried gas mains and propane tanks and that kind of thing. So we think we've got a good group. It's a time-tested program. It's really good because it fills a huge training gap that we all have. Career, volunteer, it doesn't matter. It's just a gap in our training that almost cost me my life. But so we turned lemons into lemonade, and hope if you saw this podcast and you show up at FDIC, tug on my sleeve. I'd be happy to have a beer with you.
Awesome. And yeah, just as a reminder, folks, go to FDIC.com for all the information that you need to make your reservation, pick your classes. And I'll be there all week as well. I'm doing a 4-hour workshop on Monday, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Love to meet you. If you can't make my class, because there's so many other great classes to choose from, such as the one Jerry's doing, feel free to reach out to me, shoot me a text, email, whatever. Facebook message me, and we'll meet up at one of the networking events at night. It's, as you know, Jerry, it's just such a great time, and it's FDIC April, is it 7th through 12th?
I think that's right. Yeah, it's early.
That's in Indianapolis this year. So, Jerry, thank you so much for this great discussion we just had about fire alarms, leadership, how we can motivate our members. I'm excited to have you back on to talk to you more about that. And I'd like to thank all the listeners for, again, listening in. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, I'm also an AOL guy, T.A. Merrill 63 at AOL.com. Again, it's T.A. Merrill, Merrill 63 at AOL.com. Or please give my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page a like. I'm on Instagram. I'm on X. I have my website. Again, if you want to listen to Jerry's excellent podcast he did with me a couple of years ago on natural gas emergencies, it's on my website, the professionalvolunteerfiredepartment.com. It's also on my YouTube channel, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Everything's in chronological order. It's all labeled with the guest name, easy to find. Links to my podcasts, my articles, my presentations that I do. If you'd like a copy of my book, there's a link for that as well. But reach out to me if you have ideas on what you want me to talk about and cover. This just came about a whim with Jerry and I talking a few months ago about why aren't people responding. But I hope you enjoyed it. So thanks again for listening in. My next show will be in the month of March. I don't want to think that far ahead. But again, we'll continue to have great conversations with great fire service personnel, career and volunteer from all over the country. So take care, folks. Stay warm. And remember always that true professionalism is never defined by a paycheck, and your residents are owed professional service delivered by professional firefighters who represent a professional organization. Take care, folks.